Bonjour, good afternoon, and welcome to Water Distance Education. My name is Greg Weaver, and this is ENG3C, Grade 11 College Prep English. I'd like to welcome everyone listening across the North today at home, your learning center, or on Bell Express U. To call in and join our class, you can call 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, or Dryden areas. I'd like to welcome everyone back to class today. Hope everyone had a good weekend. A quick reminder that we only have a 4-day week this week. WASA will be closed this coming Friday for Good Friday, as well as will be closed on Monday. So we will not have a class next Monday. It will be canceled, and the office will be closed on Friday. So if you have any work you want to get handy or marked before the weekend, please have it in as soon as you can. Also, this is our second last week of classes. We have 7 classes left. We have these 4 classes, plus we have 3 next week, and that's it. So please hand in as much work as you can. If you're having trouble, you're stuck, you need a bit more time, let me know. And I can look at some extension, or we can look at switching into the IL section of the course as well. But you have to let me know. I've contacted some students in the class, and others who I've tried to contact you. I've left messages. If you want to let me know how you're doing, please do. But we're going to pick up where we are looking at lesson 15 today. And we ended off class on last Thursday looking at key question 18. So we left off looking at the biography of Harper Lee, of the author. And so you read through 3 different websites to give you some ideas of what you could look at and what you could explore as part of the assignment for this question. So we did that on Thursday, and the choice is now up to you to choose a website and to get it done. We're going to look at our next topic, which looks at kind of what's the historical basis for this novel. And when I say that, what I mean is what is the basis for the events that occurred. Now, we already know this is based on Harper Lee's life. So it's like an autobiography. But the trial that happens with Tom Robinson, that is also based on a historic legal case. And that is built around the Scottsboro trials. So we're going to read about that and look at some of the similarities. Well, first of all, what happened, some of the similarities. And then we're also going to look at some questions to kind of tie everything together. Before we look at some of the themes for it and try and get into a book review if we have time today. If not, we'll pick up that tomorrow. Before we start with lesson 16 and unit number 4. So, we'll pick up that from the Scottsboro trials. That's on page 43, 44, and 45. Now the font is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to zoom it up a bit on the screen here so it's a bit easier to see. But it says, the Scottsboro trials. This describes the passage that's similar to what happened to Tom Robinson. Now, as you read it, you want to reflect on the similarities that occur between Tom Robinson's case in the novel and the case that occurred here. So it starts off, Tom Robinson's trial bears striking parallels to the Scottsboro trial, one of the most infamous or, or, or famous court cases in American history. Both the fictional and the historical cases take place in the 1930s, a time of turmoil and change in America, and both occur in Alabama. In both, too, the offenders were African American and the accusers were white women. In both instances, the charge was rape. In addition, other substantial similarities between the fictional and historical trials became apparent. A study of the Scottsboro trials will sharpen the reader's understanding of the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. Both the historical trials and the fictional ones reflect the prevailing attitudes of the time. The novel explores the social and legal problems that arise because of those attitudes. First, it's essential to understand the social and economic climate of the 1930s. We talked about this a bit on Thursday. For a background on Harper Lee's life, we'll get a bit more for this case too. The country was in the middle of what had been called the Great Depression. Millions of people had lost their jobs, their homes, their businesses, or their land. And everything that made up their own way of life. In every American city of any size, long bread lines of unemployed formed to receive basic foodstuffs for themselves and their families. This is their only means of subsistence. Many people lived in shanty towns. Their shelters made of sheet metal and scrap lumber lean-tos. All over America, it was common to see unemployed men and women riding the rails, looking for work, shelter, and food. Anything that offered some means of subsistence, some sense of dignity. It was a time when even a full-time employee, such as a mill worker, earned barely enough to live on. In fact, in 1931, a person working 55 or 60 hours a week in Alabama and other places would earn only about $156 a year. The economic collapse of the 1930s resulted in a ferocious rivalry for the very few jobs that became available. Consequently, the ill will between black and white people, which had existed ever since the U.S. Civil War in the 1860s, intensified as each group competed with the other for the few available jobs. One result was that instance of lynchings, primarily for African Americans, continued. A lynching is a murder of a person by a group of people who set themselves up as judge, jury, and executioner all outside the legal system. Nor that was by hanging someone from a tree. It was in such distressing social and economic climate that the Scottsboro case and Tom Robinson's case unfolded. Now, this is said it starts off 5 or 4 years before the start of To Kill a Mockingbird. So on March 25th, 1931, several groups of white and black men and 2 white women were riding the rails from Tennessee to Alabama in various open and closed railroad cars designed to carry freight and gravel. At one point on the trip, the black and white men began fighting. One white man would later testify that the African Americans would start the fight. Another white man would later claim that the white man had started the fight. In any case, most of the white men were thrown off the train. When they arrived at Paint Rock, Alabama, all those riding the rails, including 9 black men, at least 1 white man, and the 2 white women, were arrested, probably on charges of vagrancy or loitering. The white women remained under arrest and in jail for several days, pending charges of vagrancy and possible violation of the Mann Act. The Mann Act prohibited the taking of a minor across state lines for immoral purposes like prostitution. Because the older woman, Victoria Price, was a known prostitute, the police were tipped off, very likely by the mother of the underage woman named Ruby Bates, that the two women were involved in a criminal act when they left Tennessee for Alabama. Upon leaving the train, the 2 women immediately accused the African American men of raping them in an open railroad car referred to as a gondola that was carrying gravel, or as was called, chert. The trial of the 9 men began on April 6th, 1931. So, let's get a timeline here. At first, the whole thing started on March 25th, 1931. They were arrested, and then the trial began on April 6th, 1931. So it's less than 2 weeks for that. And we're 12 weeks after the arrest and continued till April 9th, 1931. 3 days for the trial for 9 men. The chief witnesses include the 2 women accusers, 1 white man who remained on the train and corroborated their accusations, another acquaintance of the women who refused to corroborate their accusations, the physician who examined the women, and the accused 9 black men. The accused claimed that they had not even been in the same car with the women, and the defense attorneys also argued that one of the accused was blind, and the other 2 sickly to walk unassisted, and thus could not have committed such a violent crime. On April 9th, 1931, 8 of the 9 were sentenced to death. A mistrial was declared for the 9th because of his youth. The executions were suspended pending court appeals, which eventually reached the Supreme Court of the United States. On November 7th, 1932, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered new trials for the Scottsboro defendants because they had not had adequate legal representation. That's one of the reasons why Atticus Finch is appointed in the novel, to make sure there's an adequate legal representation. They know how their rights respected. So March 27th, 1933, new trials were ordered by the court began in Decatur, Alabama. So we're now 2 years after this had happened. So in Decatur, Alabama, with the involvement of 2 distinguished trial participants, the famous New York defense lawyer named Samuel S. Leibowitz, who would continue to be a major figure in the various Scottsboro negotiations for more than a decade, and Judge James E. Horton, who had flied in the face of community sentiment by the unusual actions he took in the summer of 1933. In the second attempt to resolve the case, the trial for the first defendant lasted almost 2 weeks, so only a few hours, as it had in 1931. At this time, the chief testimony included the carefully examined report of the 2 physicians, who examined the women within 2 hours of the alleged rape crime, refuted the likelihood that multiple rapes had occurred. Testimony was also given by one of the women, Ruby Bates, who openly denied she or her friend, Victoria Price, had ever been raped. As a result of this, as well as the material brought out by investigations and by cross-examination of the witnesses, the character and honesty of accuser Victoria Price came under more careful scrutiny. On April 9th, 1933, the first of the defendants, Haywood Patterson, was again found guilty of rape and sentenced to execution. The execution was delayed, however, and 6 days after the original date for Patterson's execution, one of the most starring events in the trial took place. Local Judge James Horton effectively overturned the conviction of the jury and a meticulous analysis of the evidence they presented ordered a new trial on the grounds that the evidence presented did not warrant conviction. Now, it's probably not a coincidence that Judge Horton lost an election in the fall following his reversal of the jury's verdict. Despite Judge Horton's unprecedented actions, second defendant Clarence Doris was also tried in late 1933 and found guilty as charged, but his execution was stayed pending an appeal. During this time, all the defendants remained in prison, and not for another 2 more years were any further significant action taken as Attorney Leibowitz filed on appeals to higher courts. Finally, on April 1st, 1935, roughly around when our novel starts, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the convictions of Patterson and Norris on the grounds that qualified African Americans had been systematically excluded from all juries in Alabama. And they had specifically been excluded in this case as well. It was an all-white jury. However, not even this decision by the Supreme Court was enough for end the trials. For May 1st, 1935, Victoria Price, who was the older woman there, swore out a new warrants against the 9 men. Primary documents related to the case afford several avenues of comparison between the Scottsboro trials and Tom Robinson's trial in To Kill a Mockingbird. This is in addition to the more obvious parallels of the time, which is 1930s, the place, Alabama, and charges rape of white women by African American men. First, the threat of lynching is a common to both cases. Second, there's a similarity between the novel's Atticus Finch and real-life Judge James E. Horton, both of whom acted in behest of black men on a trial in defiance of their community's wishes at a time of high feeling. In several instances, the words of Alabama judge remind the reader of Atticus Finch's address to the jury and his advice to his children. Third, the accusers in both instances were poor working-class women who had secrets that the charges of rape were intended to cover up. Therefore, the veracity, the truthfulness, and believability of the accusers in both cases became an issue. And that's from the link that's there from thinkwest.org. You can also find a whole lot more of these details if you were just to Google this. So as you can see from the previous article, there are many similarities between the two cases. Now, based on what you have just discovered about the Scottsboro trials, and remembering what happened during Tom Robinson's trial during the novel, why do you think that Harper Lee chose to have Tom Robinson's trial occur in the way it did? That is, what is she trying to teach the reader through a portrayal of the trial and its aftermath? You'll find a suggested response to the support question at the end of the unit. So you want to think, well, what are some of the similarities between them, and why do you think that the Harper Lee, or the author, chose to have Tom Robinson's trial occur and show this way? So let's get a bit more background here, just so we have a bit more understanding of what's going on. So first, I'm going to pull up a little map so we can see exactly where these places are. I know it's easy to hear what they are, but you can actually figure out where they are. So the first thing we're going to look at is our map here. And what we're going to do, we're going to first try and find the place where they were first stopped, which was Paint Rock, Alabama. Paint Rock, Alabama. So that's the town there. As we zoom out, You can see we have Tennessee here, and this is Alabama, and this area here is all Alabama. So as we zoom in, we can actually see the train line that runs through here. And then just a bit to the west, we have Huntsville, Alabama, which is the one of the big cities, and then we have Scottsboro right here, and right for that we have that place in Decatur is right there. So everything's pretty close in here. There's Scottsboro over here. You have Painted Rock right there where the train was stopped, and Decatur right there. So that's the first thing to think about as it goes on. Now, after that, that's the first thing. That's just the map. As we go on, you want to think about that. So let's get a bit more information on that. So we'll go to Wikipedia here, and we'll just search same thing. So this is the link to Scottsboro Boys. This is who they actually were. This is the people that were on, the 9 men that were put on trial. So this is the trial in a bit more detail. So as you dig deeper into this, let's hear the Scottsboro trials and what happened. So who they were, what happened, and what was going on with it. So it's a bit more detail. And all these pictures are all the accused. And a bit more of just the details go along with that. So if you want to, you can always look those up on your own. There's this place you can find it. There's also more information all over the internet for this. There's a pretty big court case in the U.S. And you want even more, you can go similarities. So there's a lot in this here. And look at some of the details here as well. So what are the similarities? So another similarity, both are set in the 30s Alabama. Both accusing white women of being raped by African American men. Both jurors were all white. And both involved a principal or someone who wanted to stand up for what was right, regardless of what the community thought. In this case, it was the judge, William Horton, and Atticus himself. So it's another similarity there. There's a whole bunch in here that you can explore on your own. So there's a lot in there. So we're going to look at what our unit says for this, because there is a suggested answer at the back of this that helps to explain it a bit more. You can find that answer on page 55 for the support question. And it says that Harper Lee is probably trying to emphasize for her audience that her portrayal of Tom Robinson and his plight are very real. Injustices like this took place all the time to black people all across the U.S. Often, people dismiss sadness in novels, assuming that it is pure fiction. It was somewhat similar examples that exist in the real world. Making such a strong parallel, however, Harper Lee reminds us just how bad a treatment of minorities was during this period. So that's our support question for this. So we're going to keep jumping ahead, and we're going to get into looking at a bit more focus in on a bit more on some of the themes or topics of this. So, the title now, The Purr Mockingbird is a harmless creature which does its best to please its hearers by singing, but is defenseless against hunters. Perhaps hunters with a sense of sport would avoid the bird, being as too easy a target. The wrongness of killing the bird is evident, but becomes a metaphor for the wrongs of harming innocent and vulnerable people. So you want to keep that in mind as you read the selection below on Harper Lee's chosen title for the novel and what it might signify. So this is what a mockingbird itself looks like. Pretty plain, pretty ordinary. So the title just ties into prejudice. So the title is a key to some of the themes in the novel. The title is first explained in Chapter 10. At the time that Scout and Jem have just received their air rifles for Christmas, Atticus tells his children that it is a sin to shoot a mockingbird. Later, Miss Maudie explains to the children what that statement meant when Atticus said it. And says, mockingbirds are harmless creatures who do nothing but sing for our enjoyment. Therefore, it's very wrong to harm them for no reason. It's easy to see what the term mockingbird means in the story and how it can relate back to Tom Robinson, a harmless man who becomes a victim of racial prejudice. Like the mockingbird, Tom has never done wrong to anyone. Even the jurors who sentence him to death have nothing personal against him. They find him guilty mostly because they feel that to take the word of a black man over two whites would threaten the system they live under, which is the system of segregation. Tom himself is guilty of nothing but being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It is possible that the mockingbird of this title has more than one meaning. Today, mockingbirds live in many northern states, but only a few decades ago, mockingbirds lived principally in the southeastern U.S. Like the Mint Julep or the song Dixie, A mockingbird was symbolized the Southern way of life, a culture that emphasized good manners, family background, and a relaxed, unhurried pace of living. Unfortunately, another aspect of this way of life was racial segregation, a system that had been tolerated for decades by many Southerners who knew in their hearts that it was morally wrong. By the time this novel was written, perceptive Southerners could see that the opportunity for them to take the lead in ending segregation was already past. The civil rights movement, led by blacks and supported by whites in other parts of the country, was not only ending segregation, but it was transforming the politics and class structure that Southerners had taken for granted for decades. In To Kill a Mockingbird, it contains criticism of the prejudice and the moral laziness that allowed Southern society to have a double standard for justice. The novel also presents a somewhat optimistic view of what white Southerners that was somewhat unusual for the time the novel appeared. The story indicates that there are good humans everywhere, and the beings like Atticus Finch, even in the midst of a corrupt society. Even those who do some wrong, the novel goes on to suggest, often act out of ignorance and weakness rather than a deliberate impulse to hurt others. There are always a few readers who feel the novel offers an overly optimistic and simplified view of human nature. On the other hand, the hopeful note it strikes may be one of the reasons for the book's great popularity. The author does not ignore the existence of evil in society, but she does suggest that human beings are born with the desire to do the right thing. Although most readers think of To Kill a Mockingbird as a novel about racial prejudice, you'll notice that the Mockingbird, the theme, does not provide only the victims of that form of discrimination. Boo Radley, the eccentric recluse, is another harmless creature who becomes a victim of cruelty. Here again, the author seems to be emphasizing the universality of human nature. Tom Robinson's problems may be bound up with the complex social problem of racial prejudice, but any neighborhood can have its Boo Radley, all but forgotten except for the subject of gossip and rumor. And that's from an educational website called studyworld.com. Give you more insight into some of the themes that exist in this novel. So clearly, To Kill a Mockingbird has a very deep and powerful meaning, or the Mockingbird has a very powerful meaning in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. In general, it represents peacefulness, innocence, and kindness. Characters such as Boo Radley and Tom Robinson can be compared to the Mockingbird in the title of the novel, because they're harmless creatures that can't defend themselves. So we get some more support questions here before we jump into our last key question for this unit. So it's two questions. So you're going to think about what you just read about, as well as what you learned about in previous lessons. So number one says, why might Harper Lee have wanted to draw your attention to the characters of Boo Radley and Tom Robinson? And the other one is, why are they so important? So if they are so important, why not tell the story from their perspective of one of them instead of choosing Scout as narrator? That's a good question. Why are you telling from a young girl's point of view rather than from their point of view? And the suggestions can be found on page 56, the very last page of the unit. And for the first one, why would they want to draw attention to Buddha and Tom Robinson? That's really up to you. Why do you think she would do that? Was it to show this parallel, or was it done to show pretty much how simple they are? They're very easy characters to kind of relate to and understand. So that could be these two reasons there, but there's no right or wrong answer for this question. It's what you believe and what you think and how you can explain that. The second question is, how if these characters are so important, why not tell a story from their perspective instead of choosing Scout? Well, there's a pretty big list in the suggested answers. And it says that the author's decision to use a child to tell the story is a very important element in the novel. Scout has no comprehension of the complex web of sexual fears and racial prejudice that made so many white Southerners recoil in horror at the very idea of sexual contact between a white woman and a black man. It's not evident, it's not clear that Scout even understands what the concept of rape is, even though she claims to understand it. And choosing to print the events of Tom Robinson through her eyes, the author seems saying that all the analysis might be spent exploring the roots of racism and sexual fears and insecurity would be a waste of time. None of these things are the main issue. The main issue is one of simple justice. Scout, in her innocence, sees this. Even so, the child narrator might be a satisfactory, but not for the fact that Scout is a rather unusual child. She has had her share of different opinions and is not afraid to pass judgment on adult affairs. If Scout were a more usual child, we might doubt she was capable of understanding what's going on all around her. So that's it for our support question there. So it's pretty much just looking at Scout's innocence kind of really comes through. So she doesn't have any preconceived notions or any prejudices that she can apply because she doesn't know better. She's still young enough that she's still being, her impressions of people are still being formed. And that leads us into key question 19. So this says, you're going to reflect and think about the novel as a whole. Once we finish this key question, we are done with the novel until the final exam. So let's try to sit back and reflect and think about the novel as a whole. Hopefully you found it an enjoyable story with some interesting characters. If not, you need to consider what exactly you felt was wrong with the book. To help you organize your ideas, write up your conclusions in the form of a book review. Now, don't forget that you can't give away the ending to the audience. If you need help remembering the format of review, go back to Lesson 4 of Unit 1. In essence, your book review will explain whether or not you think To Kill a Mockingbird is a good novel to have today's students read in school. In your proofs, you can draw information from any of the activities done so far in this unit, or you may choose to come up with some other ideas. Just with the movie review, be sure to follow the writing process. Now, you're actually based on the book review rubric, which is the same as the movie rubric we looked at back in unit number 1. So your book review is very similar to your movie review. So you're going to have, you introduce your overall first paragraph, you have the overall view of the characters, and as a general introduction. And then you get into a basic plot summary without giving away the ending. You just look at the plot summary as a whole. And that's for normally 2 or 3 paragraphs. And then you have your opinion. Is this a good book to read? Or is it a bad book to read? What could be improved on? And you want to have a 3 points to say yes, it's really good, or there's 3 ways it could have been improved. So it's pretty much 2 different writing assignments put in one. If you want to review this, you can find that back on page 35 and page 36 of unit number 1. That's what we were looking at before, and we looked at this way back in February is when we first covered this. So it's 2 parts. First is your plot summary or your impression novel, what happened. Remember, don't give away the ending. So the book ends with them being attacked by Bob Ewell and Boo Radley killing him to save Jem and Scout. That's how it ends. So don't give away the ending, but you can talk about the trial. Talk about how her view of the world changed after that. It's kind of she lost some of her childhood innocence when that happened. And then you'll give your opinion. Is this really a good book to read, or is it not so good? What are your reasons for saying yes, it's good, or no, it's not so good? And 3 mark with the rubric. The rubric you can see is right here. It's the exact same rubric as the movie rubric that you have on page 37. So, is this lesson intended to bring some closure activities to the unit? First, you examine the influence of the Harper Lee's childhood in the storyline. As well, you looked at how the Scottsboro trials impacted her portrayal of Tom Robinson's trial. Then you looked at the significance of the child of the report. And finally, you developed a personal opinion whether this is a good or bad book to read for schools to teach. So that is all of our unit. What I want to do is we don't have quite enough time to do a quick review, so we'll come into class tomorrow. We'll do a quick review of everything we just in this whole unit. Before I do that, I want to quickly tell you what we're going to happen for the next week and a half. So what we have coming up, our last unit is all about poetry. And so we're going to look at different parts of poetry and looking at different types of language that's used before you analyze a poem. As well, you're going to look at songs and ballads and different types of poems. After you look at that, that's lesson 18 looks at more different types of poetry, looking at shape and form poems. Before we get to lesson 19, which is looking at analyzing, going a bit deeper to the meaning and the context of poems. Before you finally look at song lyrics on its own in lesson 20. See, there's only 5 lessons. They will not take us too long to do. We do have, after this class, we have 6 classes to get through 5 lessons. We'll get it done probably about 1 a day. And our last class next Thursday, we'll spend doing a general review of the whole course and the exam before we end. But that's what we'll end for today. We'll come in tomorrow, do a quick review of everything we looked at in Unit 3, then we'll start with Unit 4. If you do have any questions or concerns, let me know. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Other than that, I hope everyone has a good night. I'll talk to everyone at the exact same time tomorrow. Till then, miigwech and bye for now.